All right, so we are live and we are streaming live to Facebook and YouTube. Just waiting for LinkedIn to give the go ahead to start streaming live to LinkedIn, which I think is going to be awesome. So it's 1 p.m. sharp. Let me let people know. Let me know when you are here. Say hello. So do you see anything on the right hand of your screen that has like comments or?
Yeah, the live comments, I just saw what you just posted.
Okay, great. Great. So you should be able to see them. So there's two people on, me and V2M2 group. We'll give people a few more minutes to get on. So did you have a chance to? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I know my wife is logging in from upstairs, so I know she's going to be on.
Oh, good. Always nice to have that wife support.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but the first episode I did on the podcast was interviewing my wife. She was upstairs, I was downstairs. We're talking about when I first started the business and the difficulties, and I tell you what, that was one of my most popular podcasts. It
Was it really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think a lot of people are like, I did not realize, you know how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Takes a lot of understanding from the spouse, and it's not easy. So it was
Yeah,
painfully honest.
especially when they're both working in the business. You know,
Yeah.
she's the back office, I'm the front office. So I mean that's just the way it works. And
Oh wow.
so yep.
So I still see. So live viewers, we have. It's weird. So it has down as 4 people live viewing on YouTube. Awesome. So if you are here, we'd like to see who you are. Feel free to add a comment in the comment section. You should be able to see it there right on YouTube or Facebook. We are streaming live. Say hello so we can say hello to you. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments section. We will get to that. We're just waiting a few more minutes for everybody to jump on, and we will get rolling. We had about 20.
Yeah, I saw 18 is about an hour ago.
Yeah, and I don't know how many actually registered through Eventbrite. But that's okay, because guess what? The good news is this is going to always be available because it will be recorded. We're going to have the audio version of this as well. It also will be persistently on the YouTube channel, Facebook, and the one and only Rick Lochner is also going to have a copy of it for his use. So this will always be available. Great. We will just wait. It is now 1:03. Any problem waiting until 1:05? Is that good?
I'm good.
Okay. Awesome. 6 viewers on YouTube. Awesome. Say hello. Let us know that you're here. Leave your comments in the comments right there on YouTube. We will be able to see those, as well as any questions that you might have. Grab a drink, everybody, if you'd like to. Like water or whatever you want to drink.
Not telling anybody what's in the coffee cup.
There you go. Whatever's in a coffee cup. And we will be starting promptly at 1:05. 13:05 for you military types out there. Great. So Thomas Herman's going to be jumping on. I had a really great discussion with him yesterday with CRO Roundtable.
Right.
Yeah, it was really insightful. I don't know if you ever attended one of those, but
I did. Yeah, I was a guest of his maybe 8 months ago, 9 months ago.
Okay.
No, I lied. That's wow, time flies. That was a year and a half ago.
Oh wow. Yeah, time does fly.
Yeah,
You're having fun or busy, or maybe both.
because one of the other attendees was ended up being hired by one of my clients, and that was a year and a half ago. Crazy.
Hey, we've got Brian McClure on. Go Army. Nice to see face with no masks on. Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for jumping on. Hey, everybody, you know what? We are just going to get rolling so that I want to be respectful of everybody's time. First of all, thank you so much for jumping on the second installment of the reboot of RNR with FDR, standing for Real and Raw, with myself, Franklin Delano Rivera, giving you the real stuff, no fluff, helping you to become better at business, better at you. And just to let you know, this is not rehearsed in the least. That's what keeps it raw. Just like when Rick and I have conversations at events, it is raw. We don't pull any punches. He throws me a bunch of one-liners, and I'm just like, whoa, I didn't think about that, which is why I'm so happy to have him on here. All right. So we have with us, accomplished author, one, graduate level adjunct professor, president of RPC Leadership Associates, West Point graduate.
Go Army.
My gosh, accomplished speaker. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So we are going to be talking about what effective leadership really looks like. So without further ado, Rick, why don't you introduce yourself and then let us know why in the world should we listen to you when it comes to talking about effective leadership?
Thanks, Franklin. And yeah, I mean, this is a great topic because, you know, I'll get right to the why. I mean, look around us. You know, wherever you look in sports and business and politics, religion, we see so many examples of failed leadership. And so when we think about, and I don't think people wake up every day just to show up and do leadership wrong or ineffectively. I think for the most part, maybe their intentions are at least quasi real. But the challenge is that we just don't understand what real leadership is. And so when you look at my background, I can assure you that there are very few people in the Chicagoland area, for instance, that have worked in Fortune 100 companies, that have worked in nonprofits, that have worked in early stage entrepreneurial companies, that teach in academia and have the military background that comes out of, as you and I both know, the Ivy League Leadership School, the military academy. That's all wrapped up. And my experiences and I've done all of those effectively and successfully. And so when you think about, and this is something that my clients share with me all the time, is the fact that whatever situation you're in right now, I've likely either been there personally or helped somebody get out of a similar situation. And so it's that 40 plus years of experience that I bring to the table that helps. You know, the hard part is feeling like I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to move ahead. I don't know how to grow. I don't know how to get out of this funk. And so when we started RPC Leadership Associates 12 years ago, we realized that the biggest obstacle really was attitude. You know, the leader's attitude towards the profession that they chose. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are doing leadership instead of being leaders, if you understand the difference, right? You don't do leadership. You can. I mean, you can fake it, but that's going to have limited value. You have to be a leader. You have to internalize it. So when people ask me what I do, I, you know, kind of kiddingly say I'm in the attitude adjustment business, right? Because that really is the core of the coaching practice that we have, is being able to help people think differently in order to do differently. And so we approach it from what we call the essence of leadership. You know, your beliefs beget your attitudes beget your behaviors, and your behaviors are what are going to beget desired results. If you want to reverse engineer that, in order to achieve desired results, you have to change the way you behave. If you want to change the way you behave, you fundamentally have to change the way you think. And so we started RPC Leadership Associates. And by the way, RPC has meaning. It's realistic performance change. And so as we look at, the things that we saw over the last 30 some odd years when we started the business in the middle of the recession, by the way, just for the record, when we started that business, we realized that the moving parts we really had to address was being realistic about the current situation, that performance, not activity, was actually what's going to move the needle. And for any growth to occur, change has to happen. And so those are just givens to what I call effective leadership. And we'll go into a little bit more, but that's the essence of why we started the business and why we've been successful in enabling corporate leaders, nonprofit leaders, and small, mid-sized business leaders to make leadership a way of life.
Love that. I love that. But look, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. You said something that could have lost a few people in the beginning.
Okay.
You made the statement, chances are, whatever your situation you're in, I've been there. And with all the civil unrest going on, I could see somebody popping up and go, no, as a minority here in the United States, I don't think you really know what situation I've been in. So now I probably know what you might say, but I'd love to hear it. So how would you address that? Because I think that's what a lot of leaders are going to hear. You don't maybe from their employees, from friends.
Sure.
You have no idea what I'm dealing with. Don't even try. Okay. So I'd like you, can you address that?
I sure can. Because I'm not trying to address what it's like to walk in the shoes of a black man. I'm not trying to address what it's like to walk in the shoes of a Native American. I'm not trying to address what it's like to walk in the shoes of a woman, right? I'm not trying to do that. And that's that's not at all what I mean. What I mean is, from a leadership standpoint, the situations that are effective, that effective leaders are find themselves in. I haven't met one yet. In 12 years in practice, I have not met a situation yet that I didn't have at least some direct or 1 degree indirect experience in. Because let's face it, leadership is, I never led my black soldiers differently than I led my white soldiers. I never led my female soldiers differently than I led my male soldiers, right? As soldiers, we have a mission. Right. And that mission, and I think that is, quite frankly, on the positive side, I believe that my military experience, which goes back to the day I was born, by the way, I was born into the military, into the Army, and I didn't know what it was like to not wear a uniform until I was 33 years old when I left the Army in 1990. So
you wore a uniform when you were born in a hospital? They just Here's little combat boots, Ricky.
I was always around OD Green. What can I tell you? So
okay.
And the fact that I did the tally one time. I was looking for an icebreaker. Where they tell us something about yourself. By the time I was 40 years old, I had 37 unique addresses. Wow. So I know what resilience and flexibility, adaptability, and all that sort of thing is. So anyway, the question of it's the leadership situations that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It's not, and I'm not trying. And by the way, I would never try to. Matter of fact, that's what diversity and inclusion. That's the value of it. Is that I don't walk in your shoes. So bring me your perspective so that we can all make this work together. Right. That was the lesson we all learned in the military. Having soldiers from the barrios of LA, from the projects of New York, from the hills of Appalachia, from the affluent neighborhoods of name your state, all coming together to accomplish a common mission. That's where I learned inclusion.
I love that. That makes perfect sense. And you started off talking about attitude. And I think nowadays, with everything going on, attitude is so paramount to change, like you said. But how do you affect that as a leader when I think a lot of people's attitudes are based on life experiences? This is what they've done their entire life. I understand inclusion, but sometimes it's those, and this is, I'm just thinking,
Sure.
it's those attitudes that in their mind are the right attitudes.
Uh-huh.
And you're saying, well, we want to be inclusive, but your attitude is not the type of inclusion that we want. You see what I'm getting at?
I know exactly where you're getting at, and it's a great lead into the why I lead with we're in the attitude adjustment business, because you know it does begin with attitude. As we've individuals bring attitude, their habit of thought, and that's really how we describe attitude. And the biggest obstacle I run into with a new client is one of the first obstacles I run into is, well, Rick, you can't change my attitude.
Hmm.
And I said, well, you're half right. Right? I can't, but you can, because attitude is a choice. Now, we know that close to 90% of what we do is a function of our subconscious. We get that, right? I just watched a recent video. Denzel Washington was quoted as saying, what are we doing in the home? Right? And so kids aren't born racist. They aren't.
Yeah.
Somebody taught them. Somebody taught
Right.
a black child to not trust a white child, and somebody taught a white child to not trust a black child. So those attitudes, you're absolutely right, play into, from a leadership standpoint, everybody's bringing those different attitudes to the table. So the first question I ask is, why do you think that way? I don't ask, why do you behave that way? I ask, why do you think that way? And it's a difficult question to answer for many, well-intended leaders, because until we can make your attitude conscious, then we can start to understand and be aware of some of these unconscious biases that we have, whether it's race, gender, lifestyle, make a difference.
Mm.
But until you bring that attitude out into the open, until you embrace an attitude of playing to win versus playing not to lose, for instance, right? So
I like that.
are you playing to not screw up the status quo, or are you playing to actually achieve something greater than you have now? And that's attitudinal, and that's where it all begins.
And your answer is actually right on point with somebody. Well, I wouldn't say it's the answer to what people have asked, but it's in along those same lines. So we have a few. So Brian, I don't know if you see his questions.
I
How do
do.
we as former military leaders help others unlike ourselves see us as advocates and partners in collaboration better? And then Thomas had a great one about, if you lead them to water and they're not thirsty, how do you make them thirsty? Two great
Well,
questions.
yeah, absolutely great questions. And Brian, the way we share the value of our experiences in the military is through the stories that we tell. Right? I believe that whether you're a marketing expert like Franklin, or you're just a recovering engineer like me who can barely spell marketing 2 out of 3 times, the punchline is that stories resonate, right? Because again, going back to attitude, we hear words, but we think in pictures, right? So as you're listening to me talk, you're not formulating sentences in your mind, you're formulating a picture of what I'm saying. And these images are what leave lasting memories and get people to think differently. I love the stories of the African American man, and I apologize, I forget his name, who attended KKK rallies and gave a TED talk here in Naperville a couple of years back. Right? That is showing up with a different attitude and having the persistence to be able to say, this is challenging. I mean, basically, he was challenging the Klansmen. Why do you think that way? Right? Or the former member of the Baptist church in Kansas that would protest at soldiers' funerals. And the woman that gave the TED Talk that is no longer a member of that, totally ostracized by her family, but thinking differently, and now getting people to think differently about those prejudices that in this case had a religious foundation to it, if you will. So tell the stories of, in the military where we had that inclusion. We were all a team. We were mission driven. We all understood. We all had each other's six. All those things that we learned in the military. Because I can assure you, when I went from the Army to Sprint could not get enough of the discipline and the integrity and just the things that make up a soldier. They couldn't get enough of it. And one of the reasons why I went from a project manager to an area vice president in a Fortune 100 company in 8 years is that we weren't afraid to lead from the front, regardless of what the enemy, whether the enemy was from without or within. We weren't afraid to lead when things got a little uncomfortable. To Tom's question about the thirst, what's interesting is that leaders often make the mistake of thinking that they can motivate their followers. Motivation is an internal drive. It's that fire in the belly that dictates, what direction you're going to steer it, how much intensity you're going to give to it, and the longevity of that motivation. So it's an internal drive. The only person that can motivate Franklin is Franklin. The only person that can motivate me is me. And so the leader's responsibility, they can equip, they can train, they can, what I call, create a game worth playing, right? Create a culture that they want to be part of. Create an inclusive culture. If you want to, again, going back to, the headlines of today, it's, that's the leader's responsibility. And an effective leader knows how to do that, to create a game worth playing that everybody wants to play, not just a select few. That's attitudinal. That begins with how that leader thinks, and to expand that out to what ultimately becomes a major influence on the culture.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing. Everyone's a leader until the enemy shows up.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, my first blog when I started the business had that title. Everybody looks like an effective leader until the enemy shows up, right?
Yeah, I love that.
We're all in garrison. Hey, we're all heroes in our own mind until that first bullet flies, and then who's got what.
So you talked about creating a culture. And while I understand a culture could be a one person, a solopreneur type of business,
Mm-hmm.
When you start to bring other people, employees, even I would say 1099s or whatever, they still should be a representative of your culture. Okay. But to make it inclusive, we're talking about leading teams, right?
Yep.
With the diversity and inclusion. And how do you even do that? Because I think a lot of times, as I don't even want to know if I want to use the word leaders, I'm thinking less managers. And we had a discussion about that. Leaders and managers, is there a difference? Are they mutually exclusive or not? But I think a lot of times people want to lead based on what they think, on their own personalities and experiences. I want you to be just like me. I want to hire people just like me. I want to have a team building exercise, but guess what? It better be one that I like, that's comfortable with me, right? So how do you address that? How do you address leading teams?
Well, I think the first thing that, going back to the attitude, one of the initial attitudes that you have to have is to fully embrace the fact that leadership is a team sport. No way around it. So once you have that ingrained in your head, it's really being able to achieve those desired results through others, right? There's no other way to do it. Now, I'm a solopreneur, but I still have a culture. My attorney, my accountant, my webmaster all know what my vision is, all know what RPC is all about. Because I don't want them just doing the books. I don't want them just managing my web. I want them to understand what I stand for. And when you think about the definition of teamwork, in that a common goal, complementary skill sets, but most importantly, hold each other mutually accountable to achieving desired results. One of the major differences between a team and a group is that mutual accountability. And one of the challenges that leaders have is they don't understand the difference between accountability and responsibility. So you're responsible for tasks, you're accountable to people. That's kind of the easy way to remember it, right? You look at any job description. I've challenged organizations, large and small. I said, how many times does accountability show up in your job descriptions? I think I can still count on one hand after asking that question, for the last 7, 8 years. So, but accountability is as much an attitude. And when you build that team that has that attitude that says, it may not be my job, but we're part of a team. And if somebody's struggling, then I just automatically reach across and say, how can I help? Because we're all in this together. I had, here's a story from my own past. I had a self-governing team when I headed up a team of, 14 project managers at Sprint. And a year and a half into the tenure, I'd have weekly staff meetings, and I had 4 senior project managers, and I would rotate the senior project managers running the staff meetings. So a year and a half into this tenure, one of the senior project managers comes to me and says, Rick, would you mind stop coming to your staff meetings? So it's not every day you get a request like that from your own team to stop coming. Something I said, something I did. The explanation was, when I'm in the room, the junior project managers won't speak. But when I'm not in the room, they have a lot to say. It's called the status effect. And so for the next 2 years, I did not attend a single staff meeting. I got all the minutes. My 4 seniors kept me up to date on what was going on. I went to President's Club that year, or Ambassador's Club that year. I didn't attend a single staff meeting for the next 2 years because the team recognized we had the right people who had the right attitudes, and all I did was give them direction, and they did the rest. That's what leaders need to understand.
I love that. And I want to touch on a couple things that popped up in my head. But before I do that, you said the difference between a team and a group is what?
A team has mutual accountability to each other, whereas a group typically does not.
Okay, I'm going to scroll that at the bottom for people to.
A group will typically run to the boss, right? The team leader, the group leader, for direction. Whereas a true team, they understand the mission. They understand, they've been given the tools. A couple of the models I use in my practice for, around teams. One is the 5 dysfunctions of a team, based on the book by Patrick Lencioni. And then there's some crossover between that and what's called the rocket model. A friend of mine, Gordy Curfey, up in Minneapolis, I don't hold it against him because he's an Air Force graduate, Air Force Academy graduate, but he's done some great work around and research around teams and team building and around this rocket model. And so, which has many of the same, highlights some of the same things around teams that the 5 dysfunctions does as well. So for anybody that's listening, those are 2 places where I would start when you start to really think about teamwork and what that's all about.
Okay, awesome. No, thanks. I gotta be honest with you. I'm kind of skeptical because look, Rick. Most people are not going to think of their accountant and their web guy, as part of the team. They're just not. Those are people I've outsourced. I tell them what to do. They're great at what they do. They know how to do it. I'll just let them do that. It has nothing to do with my culture. I don't think a lot of people are going to look at it that way. You do, because that's what you do. And you've come up with a great model. You've built a great business off of that. And I'm sure it really works, or else you probably still wouldn't be around if it didn't. But most people just, number one, they're not going to think of those those outsourced services as a team member. Secondly, I wonder if a lot of business owners or even leaders realize that they have a problem. A lot of us would go, hey, you know what? I'm doing good. I'm still in business. I've been in business for many years. I'm a good leader. And a lot of stuff that you're saying, they wouldn't even think of, nor would they even think of hiring somebody to come and help them out. So how do you affect that change? Is there a warning sign? Is there something that
Sure.
it's so important today? We need change today. And
Well,
business
but
owners,
but we
yeah.
don't need change for change's sake, right? I mean, the first step is recognizing that what you're doing today isn't working. In the business world, it's we measure it by maybe revenue is flat and just can't seem to figure out a way to get past that that level uh, that level plateau, right? And sometimes it's just getting the business owner out of their own way. If you look at it at the broader things that are going on in the world today, you're right. Until you recognize that it is a problem, then it won't change. And so what Martin Luther King wrote about in letter from a Birmingham jail, he talked about the white moderates, and he talked about people that were just okay with the status quo. Basically, what I mentioned earlier, are you playing not to lose? And if you're just playing to keep it the same, then knock yourself out. But don't start whining and crying when you're at the back of the line on the back end of this pandemic, because you've been sitting around waiting for, just hanging on to the status quo, not really doing anything to position yourself to come out on the back end of this, in a different way. Or are you playing to win, where you recognize that I can't keep doing what I'm doing and get different results? Definition of insanity.
Right.
So you have to do something different. Now, one of the biggest challenges we all have as individuals is self-accountability. Right? It's one of the hardest things to do. I mean, we can rationalize ourselves to death. Right? It's the reason why I've had a coach for all 12 years I've been in business. I'm actually on my third coach. So I drink my own champagne, so to speak, in the sense that I know that at each juncture of the business, as it evolves, I need that accountability. I need to make sure that I am just not bullshitting myself into thinking everything is grand and glorious. So I need somebody to. Now I'm a contrarian by nature. I challenge myself, and I change something about myself every 6 months. So I'm no stranger to adaptability. 37 addresses in 40 years. I mean, it's kind of built into the DNA.
Right.
But even so, I'm human, and I can get caught up in the status quo. I can get comfortable. And part of being a leader is kind of staying outside that comfort zone. All 50 managers, I had 6 directors and 43 managers and at Sprint. And every single one of them heard me say either over the phone or to their face that part of my job is to make sure you never get comfortable. And at first, blush, I can read their body language. You're probably saying this guy's an ass. What I was saying was, it's once you start to get complacent as a leader, bad things start to happen. You start to regress. And I will not let that happen. And that allowed us to grow basically, an $800 million business unit to $1.5 billion in 5 years, given the fact that in the middle of that 5 years was the web meltdown. So it's just people that had the right mindset always push forward.
I love that. And, when you were talking about that immediately brought up, probably out of my 22 years of being in the pharmaceutical industry, I remember one manager. And it's because of what you just said. They stepped out of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was looking at the whole model of where to go, what doctors to see. And to me, it just didn't make any sense. It wasn't following the 80-20 rule. Corporate had pushed it down to us. I'm like, it's going to be, 36, 40 weeks before I'm even making a change in their buying behavior. That's not the way we do it. So I came up with a whole new model, and I brought it to my manager, and he's like, okay, corporate might have something to say about this because you need to, but I am going to run interference. I want you to do this, and I want you to present it to the rest of the team. And that year, 8 out of 10 of us went to President's Club for Sales. And I never forgot that he could have gotten in trouble. I don't know if he ever did, but he stepped out and it worked. And that's kind of in line with what Thomas asked us. Not exactly, but it's along those same lines. How much you worry or think about timelines. Companies have hit goals, teams, even individuals. When do you stop helping a team member? So I'm sure my manager had to hit certain metrics with me checking the box.
Sure.
But he had to say, I got to push that aside for success's sake, I guess you could say.
Sure. Well, that's one of the challenges we have as leaders is, are we making the time to invest in our team members, right? Are we managing them, or are we coaching them? And sales is a great example of, are we coaching them? Because when we coach them, we're developing them. And at some point, the best thing you can do for them is get the hell out of their way, right? Whereas if you try to manage them, you're really not managing them. You're managing the numbers. You're managing quota. You're managing timelines. And so, again, and not to, you need management and leadership. But management is typically about managing processes, and leadership is typically around leading people. Right? So if you're in that realm of trying to manage the process and disregarding developing the people that are part of that process, you're doing it backwards.
Mm-hmm.
People, putting the right people in play comes before the process. And then having a process that is efficient comes before trying to automate. We do it backwards, and many times we say, hey, we got this cool sales automation process. So how do we justify the purchase of that expensive software? We lay people off, right? Instead of salaries, we're buying licenses. And so it's just a very backwards way to look at it. But the challenge is that many managers, pseudo leaders have not had the experience of being coached. And so they default to what they know. And so they don't understand the value of coaching people to develop them versus simply sending them to training. You remember my latest blog, we've got, too much training, not enough development. We're not coaching, we're trying to manage, and that's what we've done on a societal scale. We've tried to manage racism. Not working.
Yeah.
Instead of approaching it more from a development. How do we evolve? How do we create policy that helps us evolve? Because programs aren't going to do it. And and I'll use another example that I use in my nonprofit space. You don't eliminate hunger by feeding people. You eliminate hunger by figuring out why they're hungry to begin with and solving for that. That's what leaders do. Managers feed people. That's their task. But leaders figure out why we have to keep putting out fires to begin with, and what's the root cause of that. That's when that's the development process where you really get into what's happening at a deeper level. Because if you're just managing the topical, you're really not leading anything. You're just managing to play not to lose.
I wish I could type fast enough to put some of these one-liners in there. I mean, I'm learning a lot. So what I'm hearing is there really is the problem is there's a deeper root problem, because a lot of people are awarded positions of leadership based on results, not necessarily on their ability to lead or to facilitate change. Or, I mean, you see it all the time. People are promoted based on their
Right.
results. And then, you find you can go to Glassdoor and read read reviews, say, oh, this was horrible. They managed from the top down, was micromanaged. It was, and I say time and time again, the wrong people are in the positions. I mean, so how do you answer that? And then I'd like to talk about effective communication, because all of
Sure.
this ties together.
It absolutely does. And you're right. It's when we make the distinction. It's why the title of this program was not "What does successful leadership look like?" Because successful leaders tend to be ladder climbers. They, one of the challenges with leadership development is we get too hung up on what are the characteristics of a successful leader, and we totally forget the fact that it's a team sport, right? So we get the charisma, we get all the individual qualities, and they get promoted, and then they realize that they're way over their skis. Whereas effective leaders, they are all about getting desired results through the people that they're in charge of leading. I can honestly say that being an effective leader versus a successful leader cost me promotion.
Which a lot of people aren't willing to do.
Right. Right. And so I have, more than a few times pissed off the folks in high levels, because it wasn't about me. It was about the team. It was about, the bigger picture. And that is sometimes risky, not always, but I can assure you that as I look back on 40 years of leading in all those different environments, the people I remember the most are the people that made me the leader that I am today. I very rarely ever remember the people that I reported to.
Wow.
Because I draw energy from the people that I helped grow.
Man, I love that.
And so to tie communications, the only way you can, when you think about what leaders do, setting a vision, bringing the right people into play, and then executing vigorously, as we used to say in the military, right? Execute with purpose, is
Right.
You have to be able to communicate in a way that people understand. You can't create a game worth playing without communicating what that vision is in a clear way that people have the same picture in their head. Remember, they're hearing words, but they're thinking in pictures. And the ability to effectively communicate what that vision looks like, right? Martin Luther King's "I have a dream" speech was not "I have a goal" speech, as Simon Sinek says in his TED Talk, right? They have to have that dream. Goals are dreams with deadlines, as they say. So that's where it all starts. But you have to be able to communicate that in a way that people understand. And part of the communication process that is often overlooked is the listening element, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth,
Right.
listen twice as much as you talk. But leaders get it in his head that they got to have the answers. They got to speak all the time to tell people what to do. When in fact, they can learn a lot more, right? That we don't learn anything new by talking. We just simply don't. All we're doing is repeating what we already know. So if you're looking for new, shut up and listen. And so I recall many times as a lieutenant or as a captain, company commander, walking through the barracks on a Sunday. How's it going? Right? Especially in Alaska, right? Because half the soldiers there were born and raised in Florida and Georgia, and somehow got stuck in Alaska. So after church, we would swing by the barracks and say, how's it going? Listening, hearing what they have to say. I've had people tell me I would never manage a call center. Call center is, probably the lowest of the pay scale. It's burn and churn. But all the call centers I've managed, you walk through, and They may not be at the top of the pay scale, but guess who talks to clients more than anybody else in the entire company, including the CEO?
Yep.
Call center agents. And so I'd always listen, just what's going on? What are you hearing? What's kind of getting the pulse, if you will. And then this idea that we find ourselves in now, communication is both the cause and the cure of conflict, right? We've got a lot of conflict going on. And usually it's because somebody said something ineffectively that started the conflict, whether it at a one-on-one scale or police force versus peaceful protesters. So, but the answer is effective communications. So it's both the cause and the cure. And people often ask, what is the biggest issue in business today? And it's without a doubt, surveys show it. It's about the lack of effective communications. And the number one issue in that ineffective communications is misunderstood expectations. Because let's face it, people just want to know what the expectation is. And they want to know from their leaders, what am I expected to do? What do you expect from me? So if you don't have a vision, if you can't communicate that vision, if all you're doing is you're communicating more emotion than fact, then the whole storyline gets lost and conflict will continue to happen and very little will change at a macro or a micro level.
So you talked about expectation and knowing what expectations are. Where do you see something like EQ or emotional intelligence playing into this communication? As a should that be a first step to understand how to communicate with a specific person, or is that just one of the tools?
So we had a great discussion in one of the leads groups I'm in a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how we have messed up this social contract, right? And I said, yeah. And I said, contracts are based on terms and conditions, measurable, quantifiable terms and conditions. But you have to understand the emotions that are involved, right? So you have to hear through that lens of emotional intelligence. We talk about attitudes. Emotions are just as critical. When I graduated from West Point, we believed in our heart of hearts that you could make an unemotional decision, right? You just put your game face on, say what you got to say, and that's that. And now we know through brain research and neuroscience that every decision we make has an emotional component to it. And so we've had to make that change. All three of our kids are military veterans, and it's a much more emotionally in tuned military than it was when I was in. And so it is a key component of it, but at some point you can't have too much of one or the other, right? You have to balance the opinion and the perspective with the fact, right? If you let it go too far on the emotional side, then you don't really solve the problem. And if you go too far on the logical side, you totally eliminate the human element, which won't solve anything. And so effective leaders know how to balance. They know how to listen and identify the emotion that is in play, address that emotion. One of the examples I use with my students is, can you tell the difference between when somebody is frustrated or angry? Because here's what happens. If they're frustrated and you think they're angry, you're going to overplay the situation. If they're angry and you think they're frustrated, you're going to underplay the situation. Both has negative consequences. So you really have to be able to communicate in a way that says, and it's the most obvious, how are you feeling? Right? But we just don't even think to ask that. We're trying to guess because it feels awkward to use the F word. Feeling.
Right. Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I'm usually never this quiet on this show, but as always when we talk, I always feel like you're putting my mind into a whole different type of paradigm. This has been super helpful, and we're coming up on about 11 minutes left. So, and I'd like to answer a question from
Sure.
Brian, but first, before we get into the questions, can you leave us with three things? Three things that you think are most important to take away from this conversation we had today about what effective leadership really looks like.
Create a vision, pull the right team together, and hold everybody accountable to achieve desired results, not just any result.
Create a vision, pull the right team together, and what's the last one? I'm typing this up.
And hold everybody accountable to achieving those desired results.
All right.
Just a whole lot of stuff inferred in all of that, but those, if you want to think of it as a three-step dance, that's pretty much how, as I see it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
we did have a question from Brian, and that was about coaches. You mentioned that you were on your third coach, and
Right.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. I'm like, did you kind of max out with them, or did something go wrong? He says, how do you know it is time for a new coach, and do you look for someone to develop your weaknesses or help you continue to develop your strengths? Great question.
Sure. So it's really two questions. How do you know it's time? Well, when you work with a coach, first of all, let's ground ourselves in coaching. If I create a dependency, I have failed my client as a coach, right? So it's not about creating a dependency. So my job is to help you be successful on your terms. When you've done that, my role changes. And so as we evolved, I had a coach from day one, that an accountability coach that helped me get my business started, because again, we started in July of 2008. And so we were right in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression, maybe this one notwithstanding that we're in right now. But nonetheless, 10% unemployment, and Rick decides he's going to start a business from scratch. So that it was just accountability. Hey, you said you're going to do these things. Did you do these things? Just build that momentum. Then I got to a point in 2011, I decided I was going to write my first book. And so that's when I made the first switch, because the first coach, as effective as she was not going to take me to that next level.
Okay.
So then I engaged a second coach out in California. And by the way, none of these coaches are in the Chicagoland area. So I engaged.
Is that by design?
What's that?
Is that by design, or?
Well, they're all friends basically,
Okay.
but they belong to a network of coaches that I belong to. And they're still friends, by the way. Just because I don't use them as a coach anymore doesn't mean they're still not friends, or it's still not. I mean, they're all great people. It's just that match. And to Brian's question, you're looking for that match, that can take you to that next level. So now I'm running a growing business and writing a book at the same time. So that was a different level of accountability. And so we got 3 books in, and then I decided to double down and just shift it into 5th gear and leave it there. And that's when I have the coach that I have now. So it's not a function of the other coaches failed. It's just that right combination of personality and trust and style, right? We coaches have our own styles, and just looking for that right mix to take it to the next level. As far as strengths and weaknesses, the answer is yes, right? Coaching is all about developing the person, right? We coach the person, not the problem. Whatever problems there are, we're coaching the person to be able to deal with those problems. So I've always believed in continuing to leverage your strengths, but especially the strengths that matter most to you, but also mitigating the weaknesses that may be holding you back. Because not all weaknesses hold you back. Just there are certain ones that will hold you back. Just like not all strengths, have a positive add to your business. I'm a halfway decent woodworker. That's a strength. It doesn't necessarily add much to RPC Leadership Associates, but it's a strength. And so it's really coaching the person to be able to be successful on their terms. And so it's a little bit of both.
So is it a bad thing if you don't have a coach? I mean, I've never had a coach. I've never had a business coach. So is that a bad thing? Or
well, let's put it this way. It's you talk to anybody, you talk to any leader that has been successful, effective, and by whatever criteria, and somewhere along the line they had a coach. So I'm not saying it's bad to not, but how much better could you be if you did?
All right, you got me thinking.
And like I said, I drink my own champagne. I'm not just putting it out there as something that everybody else does, because I to this day, every other Tuesday morning, I'm on the phone with my coach.
I like that. And you were talking, and we were talking. I had a good conversation with Thomas, who's on here, and we were talking about a lot of the things going on today, and we were addressing, I believe, diversity in a way, and or maybe it was you, because, or maybe not. I can't remember. I think I'm getting to that age. I can't. But
you say the memory's the first to go.
Yeah, I know. Memory of you will never be the first to go there. But I think should there be a okay, we're talking about building a team. And you'll find right now that most employers, or maybe leaders, will pick a team based on specific characteristics. And I think one of those could even be education. Or let's say a company hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that the world is changing so much now, with so much information being readily available, that it's possible to have a high-performing team member that maybe didn't go to an Ivy League college, just kind of learn from the school of hard knocks? Maybe you look at people like 50 Cent, who used to, do drugs, and now he's a pretty good businessman.
Right.
What's your answer to that? Because a lot of people, I think, are stuck in an old way of building a team. There might be a new way to look at it.
Here's what typically happens, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, in the fact that we hire people in our own likeness far too often, and it's one of the reasons why you create that vision first, and then you put a team together to achieve that vision. Right? It's pro sports do it. They build their team to accomplish a vision of winning a championship, let's say.
Okay.
And then when that vision or strategy changes, they keep the same old people. And now we're trying to achieve a new strategy with the same team. And that very rarely works.
Wow.
So you have to be in a position to say, what type of team do I need in order to achieve the vision and strategy of the organization? What type of leadership do I need to advance the inclusion movement? Right? Because I quite frankly, I don't see a Martin Luther King out there. I don't, not yet anyway. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't see them, because that's really what's needed to channel the movement, so it's not all over the place. Any movement.
Well, we can go on and on talking about that. I mean, we're only going to get so far in an hour, but
well, hopefully we wanted to talk about certainly business teams, but we also want to talk, not ignore the reality of what's going on, and the fact that what we're talking about in both cases is effective leadership, and what that truly looks like. A movement needs a vision, whatever that movement is. Teams need a vision.
Right.
And because once that vision is understood, it has a life of its own. I love the fact that the March on Washington was predated cell phones. And yet word got out somehow that, that there was this event that was going to go on. And so it's simple in its structure, very complex in its execution.
Right.
But that's why we need real, authentic, effective leaders and not all these friggin' wannabes.
Yeah, we can.
Since we're being raw.
Hey, honestly, we should actually do a segment called "Are You a Freaking Wannabe?" or something like that. Yeah, I'd like that. I got to put that in my. But hey, look, do we have another
Are there
question?
any other questions that?
All right, so you see one from Brian up there. This will be our last question. I put Rick's contact information on there. I'll say it audibly in a second. But so many organizations I've talked to worry about alignment to the point they look to hire themselves versus rounding out their perspectives. Frustrating as Abraham Lincoln's teams of rivals worked.
Yeah, this is a common thing I see a lot of on LinkedIn, and it's this cultural fit idea. People get freaked out about cultural fit in the fact that it becomes very homogeneous. And I argue, then you haven't defined your culture the right way, right? So if you have a culture of adaptability, then you're going to hire adaptable people. And adaptable people by definition are going to challenge the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want, right? But if you define it in some static way, your culture defined as some static definition, then yeah, eventually you're going to have a homogeneous culture and it'll cave in on itself at some point. So it's how you define the culture and how you define the fit. I want contrarians. I want people to challenge me. I want people to tell me that, hey, this isn't working for us. And in a way that allows me to listen and say, you're right. Going back to call center agents, 2 call center agents, both Hispanic, came to my door, knocked on my door I was the vice president of the unit. And I mean, they skipped like 3 levels of chain of command, but they knocked on the door and said, this would be a lot easier because it was medical scripts. It was healthcare related. This would be a lot easier to do these scripts that we're using if we translated them into Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I never would have thought of that. And I said, awesome idea. So these 2 call center agents off the clock translated all the scripts into Spanish. 25% of our population, target population, were Hispanic. And so guess who made headlines in the monthly newsletter the next month? Right? I mean, that's people can't be afraid to come knock on an executive's door and say, we got a better idea. That's creating a game that they wanted to play. They were not afraid.
Right. I love that. You even got me thinking about my own organization because I do want people to do that. But sometimes I realize that my team is made up of the people that will not do that. Mm-hmm. I have had people on the team that will, and I've taken their advice. I'm like, my gosh, I never would have thought of that.
Right.
But they were comfortable enough to come to me. No, this is all great. Look, we can go on and on and on, and I would love to have another segment with Rick where we could probably be a lot more specific in what we talk about, but we felt that this was a good topic at this time. I have Rick's information on the screen for everybody listening to my audio. It is Rick Lochner, RPC Leadership Associates. His email, rlochner, it's R as in Romeo, LOC as in cat, H is in hotel, N is in November, E echo, R Romeo at rpcleadershipassociates.com. Phone number 630-222-1623. Reach out to this guy. Every time I talk to him, whether it's in a semi-formal format like this or just out and about, I have learned so much from him. And so I highly recommend reaching out to Rick, having that conversation, see if he actually might be a great fit for your organization or just for you. Rick, thank you so much for jumping on R&R with FDR. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure, Franklin.
And to Brian, Thomas, everybody else who was listening, thank you so much. We're going to keep going with this on a weekly basis. I'm sure we'll see Rick again. As everybody, we are ending the broadcast. Thank you and have a great day and be safe. Bye-bye.